was born into a land less than thriving. The great Kushan Empire had fallen, taken with it its people, great debates, and artistic traditions. My parents were political. My father was a Brahmana, rehearsed in the Vedas. My brother Asanga became a monk 1 year before I was born. It was the 4th century, in a place called Peatra, in the kingdom of Gandhara. Hello, they call me Vasubandhu. Here is my story. In my coming of age, I began with the Sarvastivada order. As Buddhamitra as my teacher, I studied the Vibhasikas. Then came Santratikas. Under the teacher Manaratha, I learned to reject all that was not the word of Buddha. I ridiculed the Vibhasa for their dogmatism. Yet I was curious to learn more about Vibhasikas, so I traveled to Kashmir and pretended to be a lunatic so the locals would not distrust me and would allow me to roam free. And it was in this manner that I learned for 4 years of the Vibhasikas. Then it was back to Peatra. I lectured to all who would listen. I composed the Abhidharma Kosha as well as an auto-commentary on the Kosha, in which I critiqued the dogmatics I concluded on in the Vibhasika. I then composed the Kosha Vyahasa. My works became the standard Abhinama work for unorthodox India. Ayodhya was where I journeyed next. By then I had thought I learned enough of my brother Asanga's ways to know they were no good. Many heard poorly of Asanga's Yogacara Bhumi on my account, but I changed my mind. One day, Asanga's messengers arrived and recited the Akshaya Mati Nirdesha Sutra, as well as gave me Mahayana texts. I was overcome, so I decided to visit Asanga. I returned to Perusappara, where Asanga was living, and I ended up staying there for quite some time. I read the Shatasahasrika Prajna Paramita Sutra. I wrote commentaries to Akshaya Mati Nirdesha Sutra, Dashapumika, and many other Mahayana sutras and treatises. I became known as a Mahayana master, and I wrote the Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. I wrote the Paramartha Saptati treatise, which earned me 300,000 pieces of gold, for which I used to build 3 monasteries, one for Mahayanas, one for Sarvastivadins, and one for nuns. In my commentary on Medhyanta Vibhaga, I showed my interest in the technique of meditation and proclaimed that enlightenment is beyond words, and that one must use meditation to achieve and progress on the path. In the Bodhisattva Bhumi, I declare that non-harming must be strictly observed, and only bodhisattvas may kill if it is a situation such as killing a king to prevent him from committing atrocities. I wrote my most famous Yogacara texts, Vimsadika and Trimsadika, also known as the 20 and 30 verses. And then I became an old man. I wandered around and eventually died away from Perusappara when I was 80. Why have I told you all this, you may wonder? What have I gained from all my studies, debates, and publications? I tell you this to illustrate why I am a credible source for what I am about to tell you. When studying Vibhasikas, I became concerned with the question, is the object of consciousness just a name? Everything was divided up into categories of fictitious and non-fictitious names. Of course, fictitious names are considered non-real and illusory. Non-fictitious names are considered real, external objects existing in themselves, such as birth and decay. But what does consciousness get categorized as? Certainly it is not illusory, but it is also not an external object, as being non-fictitious means it exists in itself and implies that sentient beings exist in themselves, something that is commonly known to be untrue. And if non-fictitious words are existence in themselves, then how is it that one can drop a non-fictitious word from a sentence without any loss in meaning? It is this sort of dogmatism that led me away from Vibhasikas. Now I came to understand the validity of proof. Proof can be ascertained by basing exclusively on itself and not on anything else. But this begs the question, what is the point of perception if validity of proof can be ascertained on itself? Perception can only be defined in the language in which it is expressed. Once it is defined, though, there must be a mechanism that exists to account for it. And so, I decided to re-examine consciousness. Consciousness, then, would appear to give rise to perception, and when one perceives something, they are aware of it, giving rise to self-knowledge. But what gives rise to consciousness to begin it all? There is only one explanation. Consciousness, like perception, can only be defined in the language in which it is expressed. Therefore, consciousness can be nothing more than a transformation that becomes verbal constructs, words, which then can never be existence in themselves. All names are simply what cause one to know. Existence can only be defined as this transitive state, through which names are assigned, and therefore, existence is consciousness. There is no such thing as person, and there is nothing outside of the mind, only consciousness. Our entire human experience is nothing more than the imaginations and discriminations arisen from consciousness. It is the source of all of our problems and all of our joy. It is common knowledge that life is a cycle, and so reincarnation is a given. But what reincarnates if there is no person, no soul, as I have stated? Evolved over time is a collection or store of imprints of perception, which all beings contain, and the contents of which are similar in all beings. This is what reincarnates. Only when one, such as Buddha, has removed all impressions in this store, will they reach enlightenment and cease to be part of this human cycle. This store, that must be cleaned out, is called the Alaya Vijnana. When the store is cleaned, it becomes the Amala Vijnana, or pure consciousness. The human experience is secondary, and only the result of Alaya Vijnana. We are spiritual beings primarily. Rather than the two categories of fictitious and non-fictitious in which everything falls, there are three categories, or the three natures. Everything can be broken down into imaginary, provisional, or real. All experience can be further divided into 75 dharma, which break down into 5 categories: consciousness, physical world, derivatives, uncomposed, and unassociated. These 75 dharma can be analyzed in terms of their karmic qualities and broken into 6 types of cause, 2 of which directly relate to karma. The first is the sabhagahetu, or similar cause. This type of cause creates an effect similar to it, which is either profitable, unprofitable, or undetermined. Profitable and unprofitable are deliberate actions, thoughts, and awareness accompanying those thoughts. Indeterminate are all others. The second is the vibhagahetu, or cause of fruition. This is the type of cause that gives rise to the final result of a causal sequence initiated by a past karma. An example of this would be the sadness or joy experienced as a result of a profitable or unprofitable action. I should note here that not all actions are forms of karma. Enlightened beings who have rid all desire no longer deal in any forms of karma. Naturally, then, their profitable actions will have no karmic result. Why does it seem that people's experiences differ so much, yet those who have similar experiences seem to be grouped together? In the Vimshadika treatise, I explained collective karma groups. A person's karma determines the situation they experience, and how one sees things is shaped by that experience. And experience is intersubjective, so therefore we gather with those who see things how we do. The Alaya Vijnana is identical to the second of the 3 natures, provisional or dependent. In this dependent nature we have the potential to produce false perceptions, which are samsara, or suffering. Dependent nature is divided into subject and object when the mind discriminates an external object. This is what creates false perceptions and samsara. Conversely, we have the potential for liberation, which is nirvana. When the emptiness of subject and object is realized, the Alaya Vijnana is rid of all discrimination